And good day, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another live Q&A session. I'm Jason Horsch, owner of Xanadu Gallery. Today is Friday, June 7th, 2024. Always great to be here with you in a Q&A session, as I mentioned in the email. Today, we're going to be taking a look back at our season in Scottsdale. We're going to see what we can see in terms of any trends, and just talk a little bit about the state of the art market. Before we start, though, I have to mention I'm coming to you. You'll notice I'm in a different location. I'm coming to you from Pine Top in eastern Arizona. We're up in the mountains, and Carrie and I are here decompressing. We have had a busy couple of weeks. I mentioned it, and let me just throw some photos up here so you can see. I mentioned that our son was getting married last weekend. That all went off. It went off very smoothly. In fact, it almost seems like without a hitch. Well, there was one hitch, right? They got hitched, but other than that, it was just very, very smooth. But even so, of course, it's exhausting getting everything prepared and set up. You can see my son Parker there, and his lovely new bride, Olivia, coming in. We held the wedding at my in-laws' home, a small service for very close friends and family. So just about 40 people. We were in charge of getting the home taken apart, all the furniture out, and putting in everything we needed to host the wedding. We had movers do all that, but just watching them was exhausting. And just but it turned out to be a spectacular ceremony. Olivia's family, this is her grandfather performing the ceremony. He's a pastor from Oregon, and it was just beautiful. I admit it. There were tears in my eyes. It was a beautiful service. And then after the wedding service, we hosted an open house reception at our gallery, which was a lot of fun, and had about 250 people through that evening. So, needless to say, then putting it all back together, it's going to take some time to recover from that. And so Carrie and I snuck away. We're up in Pine Top now, enjoying a little bit of nature, cooler weather, and just taking it a little bit easy. But I have had time over the last couple of, really the last 3 or 4 weeks, to be working on kind of deconstructing and analyzing our season and sales, running the numbers, creating reports. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today, sharing that information. And we're going to get into some nitty gritty. I appreciate those of you who submitted some suggestions of some of the metrics you would like to see, and I've tried to incorporate those into this presentation. And at the end, I will, of course, leave time for you to ask any additional questions that come up. So first, I have to say that if I were to come up with a title for this season, I would call it The Season That Got Better. And by that, I kind of almost see it as the season is having two distinct halves. There was the first half of the season, which was, well, and let's just start with what the season in Scottsdale is. We're a winter art market. Our weather facilitates that. We're temperate and even warm during the winter months. And then we get very hot during the summer. So in a lot of ways, we're the reverse of many art markets. And in essence, I like to joke that our strong season begins when the temperature drops below 105 degrees, and it ends when it climbs above 105 degrees. And so that typically aligns with sometime in mid-October through the end of May. And we got a little lucky this season. The cooler temperatures stuck around clear into the first part of June. Although we have watched, it would be rude to call it glee because we're not there. We're up enjoying cooler weather, but we've watched as temperatures have climbed above 110 this week down in Phoenix. And so it's certainly getting warm. So with that October through the end of May season, that is when we have to make our hay and generate enough sales to sustain us through the summer. As I mentioned, when we did a review in January of 2023, the whole year, we had seen a fairly significant decline in overall sales through 2023. Our total sales, and now I'm not going to remember the exact figures, but they were down somewhere over, in the neighborhood of, between 20 and 25% overall. If we were to take out our online sales, which saw a significant increase last year because of our activity on social media, if we were to take those out, our overall sales were down more in the 40+% points. A significant decline in sales. And as we discussed in January, there are a lot of things you could point to. The economy, obviously, and inflation, and also just the fact that 2021 and 2022 were very strong. And so we were coming out of that. And, we also saw some other factors that I'll talk about a little bit later today, in that we had a few of our typically best performing artists who either didn't get us quite as much inventory as they typically would, or what I'm going to talk about in particular just did some work that didn't hit with our clients quite as well in 2023. And so all of that combined to make a pretty significant dent in our total sales in 2023. And so for the first half of our season this year, which was still in, excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. Let me get a little water here. There we go. The first half of our season, which was still in 2023, sales were up a bit, but it was still fairly soft. And so if I look at our total season from October through April, I told you that the season is through May, but I can't give you May numbers yet because we haven't finalized those in our book. So the actual figures we're going to be looking at are going to be October through April, and the total sales were up about 13%. That's not insignificant, but as we're going to see in a minute, as you kind of look at the chart of year-to-year sales, that's just kind of clawing back some of what we lost in 2023. Now, if we are to look just at this year, this part of the season that is in this year, so January through April, we see a more significant increase. And their sales are up almost 30% over the same period last year. Again, a significant increase. And if this trend continues through the year, which who knows if it will, but if it were to continue through the year, we would anticipate us being back to about where we were in 2022. That's hard to say because there's so many 20s in it. But we're just beginning to see those trends kind of kick in. So let's look at some of the charts. Here is the month by month sales through this season are the solid line, and the dashed line that you see in the background would have been the sales from the same period during the previous season. So October of 2022 through April of 24. And boy, it's the latter half of this season where you really do see the significant increase in sales. As we look year over year, we kind of see that, again, that climbing back out of the dip that occurred in 2023. And, certainly, and by the way, this is actually not looking at annual sales. It's looking at seasonal sales. So you can see that these are the seasonal figures year to year. What does this tell us about the art market? It tells us that there are going to be ups and there are going to be downs. And if I extended, if I were able to go back and extend this clear back to 2001 when we started, you would see a pattern very much like this, where there are going to be these peaks and valleys that occur in the art market. And there's some real volatility there with some pretty significant upswings and downswings. And that's my next chart is going to show us, this is the percentage of increase in sales or decrease in sales. So you can see season over season, we've had some seasons where we've been up over 25%, and then some seasons where we've been down almost 25%. So let me start with some perceptions on this as a gallery owner. Um, I've talked about this before as we kind of think about managing our business in the long term. Boy, you sure have to be very careful as you respond to market conditions, as you plan for the future. You just can almost be certain that whatever happened last year, this year is not going to be the same. It could be up quite a bit, or it could be down quite a bit. And we just would not want to celebrate too much when things are up. I've told you many times before that when we have a good season, I'm not rushing out to the Maserati store to get a new sports car. I'm socking away into our accounts to potentially deal with downturns. And certainly last year we saw that. And I'll mention that in responding to the downturn last season, we did make some changes in our business. We had a session a couple of months ago where I talked about some of our expenses as a gallery. And there are some hard fixed costs that you can't change. So one of the big ones, obviously, is our rent, our lease rate that we pay. That is set in contract. And unless there are extraordinary circumstances, you just know that every month you're going to have that overhead. Our utilities are fairly fixed in Arizona. They're somewhat moderate during the winter months. They get quite high during the summer months. You've got to be able to plan for that. And then our other big expense, which is not quite as fixed, it's somewhat flexible in the sense that we pay percentage commissions, is our labor cost. The team that I have working with me, staff, that is the number one big expense. And yes, as sales decline, commissions go down as well. But you do see that expense as something you have to really think about as things go up and down. And so and that's probably one of the more challenging aspects of running a business is kind of working with all of that and figuring out how to adjust when the time comes. I've never, and I'll knock on wood when I say this, and say it with real humility, and that is, I've never had to let someone go or fire someone or anything like that for a business, and I suspect that is one of my kryptonites as a business person, is that I'm very reluctant to do something like that. But in 2023, we had some turnover in staff. I had a staff member who left the state, actually two staff members who left the state. And we had been running with a total of 3 employees in Scottsdale. And coming out of last year, we had the 2 leave. I only hired 1 back. And so we're right now at, just myself and then 2 staff members. And we've been making that work. It's a little bit more complicated, but that's kind of the adjustment that you think about making as we're working on getting kind of back up to where we were previously. Now, as an artist, what does this mean to you? Well, you also, and obviously this is not going to come as any surprise to anyone, but you are also going to be dealing with some volatility in the art market. If I were to kind of think about lessons learned, both over the course of my career in the gallery business, but also just over these last few years, I think one of the big ones I would say is that we need to be prepared for shifts in the market, but I would encourage us not to think of ourselves as powerless or victims in the market. We really do have a lot of opportunities to take whatever the circumstances are and to work very hard often to turn them in our favor. And especially now, and again, let me just go back where, we're now climbing and seeing an increase in sales. That was not necessarily a given. And as I've had some conversations with other gallery owners, both in Scottsdale and by email with some other gallery owners in other parts of the country, the reports I'm getting about the overall health of the art market are still pretty mixed. There's still reports of, boy, it's still difficult. The market is still down, and sales are softer than they had been in the previous several years. Um, I certainly can comprehend that, but rather than sit back and say, well, there's nothing we can do about the economy and obviously it's an election year this year. That can always throw things into a bit of turmoil. People aren't as focused on necessarily on art. You could look at all of those things and just kind of say, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. I guess we'll just kind of wait it out. And, I sat down with both with Carrie and my gallery director this season, and our response was, no, we're going to push. We're going to do everything we can to make the most out of this season. We don't know what the results are going to be, but we're going to really, implement some strategies that we hope will help increase sales. And we did that, and we have seen a bit of an increase. And so we're going to talk about some of those things that we've done. Okay. Let's take a look at and break down some of the sales a little bit. This chart is showing you the total value, the total revenue generated by different price points. And so in other words, what you're looking at here is if it says under $500 over on the left, that means that almost 40% of our total revenue generated was generated by the sale of artwork that was valued under $500. This has been fairly typical for us over the last several years. Even more so in 2023, where we saw a drop off at the higher end. Those lower price points really kind of helped save the season, as I mentioned already, and some online sales and social media sales. What we're seeing, though, the trend that we have seen this year is, or excuse me, over this season, is that some of the upper end came back. So that $2,500 to $5,000, and the $5,000 to $10,000, together those add up to about 35% of total sales. And those sales had been down fairly significantly last year and are on their way back. Again, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the work we've done to facilitate that and to focus on that. But that made a huge difference. We kind of saw the sales at the lower end were fairly steady from last season to this season. It was the increase in higher end sales that helped push things upward. Now, if we look at volume, so the last one is where our money is coming from. This chart is showing you where you're spending your time. My sales staff, where they're spending their time, and that is, you've got to process these sales. Every single sale that occurs is going to be some time interacting with the customer, some time writing up the sale and handling the logistics, if they're shipping or even just wrapping the artwork up. And so what this chart is looking at is just the number of artworks sold at each of the price points. And obviously, it's logical. This makes sense. You would think that, okay, if the under $500 make up a significant portion of our revenue, to get to that level of revenue, you've got to sell many of them. And so 91% of the total number of pieces sold were valued at under $500. And you can kind of see the smaller pieces of the pie up top. As a business owner, you just have to be thinking about what are the things I can be doing to make the sales process more efficient, so that we're not losing higher end sales because we're spending so much time on the lower end. And we've certainly streamlined a lot of that. Over the last several years, we've made some efforts to automate the process, for example, of dealing with the inventory of the high volume, lower price point artwork, so that we're not spending all of our time kind of dealing with those transactions. We've automated our reporting process, so that my sales staff is not having to hand record every single piece of artwork that is sold into a spreadsheet, which was how we used to do it. We now have a system in place where that gets pulled from our point of sale and goes right into a spreadsheet on its own for payment and reporting purposes. So again, just something that you really want to be paying attention to is, where am I spending my time as I'm selling my art, and what can I do to make sure that I am leaving myself enough latitude and enough free time to work on the most valuable sales that I could be working on. We saw an increase in the average order value. So this is a bit of, again, a reflection of that chart showing an increase in higher price points. And that is that our average order value, the total amount of the ticket or purchase that someone is making from the gallery, went to $680. And that's a 45% increase. So a significant increase for this season over last season. And again, we see that, with a real spike towards the end of the season, as we had quite a number of higher valued items selling out of the gallery, from January through the end of April. Total number of orders was down, so by about 24%. Again, so that's an indication of that shift from having much of our volume at the lower price points and having fewer transactions, but having the value of those transactions having increased quite a bit. Now, as you think about that, there's a little bit of a challenge there. And we're going to see this manifested a little bit in a moment as we look at our shift in terms of where sales were occurring, whether it was in the gallery or online through our social media efforts. Obviously, the ideal here would have been for this chart to look just like it does, a significant increase in the average order value, but to have this chart show either a steady number of sales, no decline in total volume of sales, or even a little bit of an increase. But you are always going to have a little bit of a trade-off in this, or at least you're likely to have some trade-off in that, our limited resource is the time we have available to be working on or working with customers and working on sales. And if you are doing significantly more sales in one part of your business, the higher end sales, for example, it is going to have some impact on the time you have available to generate the sales on the lower end. So, ultimately, we're working to increase both of those numbers. We would prefer to see both our average order increase and the total number of orders increase. And certainly seeing a decline of 25% in the total number of sales is not quite ideal. Now, part of that, again, is that this does include that October through December, which was a bit of a significant decline in total number of transactions. And as we look at social media sales, that's going to be the culprit on this one, but we'll see that in just a moment. Okay, here's another important one. This is a new report that we have available to us through Shopify. And this is a question that comes up with some frequency. How many of your sales are to new customers who are coming through the door versus returning customers? Now, this rate is not telling you the total dollars generated. It's simply saying, of the total number of orders that were placed, what percentage of those orders were placed by first-time customers versus returning customers. And so what we see here is that about 30% of our total sales were generated to returning customers. That's pretty important, obviously. Now, hopefully, at some point, this report will expand and will tell us the numbers by volume of sales generated. I suspect that the total dollars generated by returning customers was significantly higher than 30% of our total sales. In other words, the value of the artwork that returning customers purchase tends to be higher than the value of the artwork purchased by first-time customers. There's a kind of cultivating process where customers become more comfortable with you, more confident in their purchases, and you see the value of those purchases increasing. But boy, at 30%, it is a reminder to us how important it is to continue cultivating relationships with our customers and inviting them to purchase again. This is a good argument for your newsletter. It's a good argument for your social media interactions with existing customers to remind them that you're there and to invite them to come back and make additional purchases. Okay, here's another one that I often get questioned on, even in these sessions: which sells better, contemporary art or traditional art? In the past, I have declined to share these percentages because I am, frankly, because this information just should not be relied upon to make any decisions in your art making processes. Because really, what you're seeing here is just a very narrow slice of a very narrow slice of the art market, and that is that you're looking at my gallery, and this is a reflection of the mix of art that I show in my gallery, not any kind of reflection of the broader art market. Now, it is interesting that these numbers came out so nearly equal this season. I guess I should mention the other reason that this is a challenging number to share with you is because if you go to my website and go to the artist page and start looking through the artists that I'm representing, you're going to have a bit of a hard time from artist to artist saying, well, is this particular artist more traditional or more contemporary? And our gallery leans a little bit more, again, towards the contemporary side, although I think of us as transitional. We're not a abstract expressionist or minimalist kind of venue. We have representational artwork. And so for determining whether an artist was traditional or contemporary, I had to use some fairly subjective judgment and think about the clientele who's purchasing that artwork and the homes that it's going into. And for us this year, it happened to be that there was a fairly even split, but this goes back and forth and can vary pretty significantly from year to year. But as I say, this season it was fairly evenly split. And again, the reason I'm reluctant to do this is because I would not want you as an artist to look at this chart, although this year it wouldn't do this to you. But even if this chart said that 80% were traditional and 20% were contemporary, or the reverse, that's not useful information to you when you're deciding what you're going to go into the studio and create, because it is not a reflection of what's going to sell well for you. And obviously my artists are creating what they create, and the market then kind of determines what's going to happen to sell well. Okay, now the other part of this question is, okay, which sells better, sculpture or wall art? Two-dimensional or three-dimensional? And again, even this number is not very helpful. If you were to go back to my website and look at some of the artists, you would see that I have some artists whose work is displayed on the wall, but it is distinctly sculptural. And I have some artists who are on pedestals that their work involves some painting and two-dimensional work. And so it's a little bit hard to split this out and a little bit subjective, but I get this question a lot. And so here is the chart showing you that 63% of our sales were of wall art, and about 36% of the sales were sculptural. I would say that trend is, fairly accurate of a broader trend in the total market, in that For whatever reason, human beings tend to think about their walls first and their flat surfaces second. And so there does tend to be a little bit more of a market for art that's going to go onto the walls. I think I've shared the story before, of a client who had been coming to our gallery for years, and I was outside of the gallery, and we were just talking about different art forms, and this client said to me, "Have you ever thought about showing some sculpture?" And I was dumbstruck because we show tons of sculpture. We have many sculptors and a lot of sculpture, but for whatever reason, as he was going through our gallery, he was just so focused on what was on the wall that his brain did not register the sculpture. And so I invited him, next time you're in the gallery, we're not going to look at the walls. We're going to spend some time focusing on sculpture. And it's kind of interesting to see how the art collector's brain works. Okay, here are some numbers. These are checks written from the gallery to artists. These are our top 10 artists, showing you the total amount of the total value of their commission payments. And so our number one artist received $67,879 from that October through end of April period. And you can kind of see, just going down there, 47,000, 30, 34, 24, 10, 7, 5,600, 4,300. And I want to share this with you because I just want us to think a little bit. This one does have some implications for us as artists as we're thinking about working with galleries, in that, some of your strategy as an artist, the number of galleries you're going to need to show with, for example, the total volume of work that you're going to be producing, some of the logistics and those kind of things, can be quite significantly impacted by the kind of volume you would be producing in the galleries in which you're showing. And so, for example, let's extrapolate here. If you look at those top, 5 or 6 artists, those artists generating sales at those kind of levels, if they could have just 3 or 4 or 5 other galleries generating those same kinds of sales and commissions, that's all they would need, right? You could be showing in just 4 or 5 galleries. For some of us, it might just be 2 or 3 galleries at those sales levels. Now, I do want to mention that one of these artists, and I'm being a little bit careful here, I don't want to reveal any individual artist's sales from our gallery. So that's why you're not seeing artist names associated with these figures. But I will mention that one of these artists produces artwork at a significant volume. It is the lower price point items, and he has a studio system going where he hires artisans to help produce the artwork. And so that really helps with total volume. And his business model is very different in that it's almost more of a manufacturing process. If you were to think about the business model and the creative process, but that's one of those artists. All of the other artists that you're seeing are artists like you, who are individually in the studio, hand creating each piece of artwork that's coming out of that studio. And for those artists, if the price point of individual artworks isn't extremely high, it means that they're having to produce some volume to get to these levels of sales, and they're going to be limited in the number of galleries that they can show in, just by the virtue of the amount of time they have available for them to produce, and total volume of artwork available. And so for those artists, it's going to be a lower number of galleries that they need to work with. As I move down this list, we get down towards the bottom of this list, 7,700, 5,600, 4,300. Well, my gallery's generating some sales for them, but they're going to need to be thinking about working with a larger number of galleries. Or it may be that, my market just is not quite as strong as some of their other markets. They continue to work with me because they appreciate having $7 or $8 or $10,000 in sales, on a kind of steady basis, from my gallery. But maybe some of their other galleries are doing a bit better than that. But it just tells us that these artists are going to need to have a little bit broader portfolio of galleries that they're working with, to generate the sales that they need to be successful. And in fact, that is what you would see as you looked at those artists. Okay, I mentioned that I would talk a little bit about this. This shows you total artists' payments for one artist that I represent, year over year. Actually, it's season over season. So during the 21 through 22 season, it was $30,000 in sales, or excuse me, 30,000 in artist commissions to that artist. And up to that point, that had been our best season for that particular artist. So somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 in sales during the seasonal period. Then we got into the 22 through 23 season, and that number dipped fairly significantly. And interestingly, that dip corresponded with a couple of different factors. Number one was just that the market seems to be softening. There are issues with the economy and so on and so forth. So that could be slowing things down. We had implemented a price increase, for that artist's work, which makes sense. Right after the 2021 through 22 season, you say, we ran out of inventory. We did not have enough inventory to supply all of the buyers who might have wanted to purchase your work. What can we do about that? Can you produce more? Not significantly more. Well, then we need to be increasing the value of the artwork. We did that. And then you get into the 2022 and 23 season, and the total value, even though the value of individual works has increased, the total volume of sales decreased. And that will induce some panic, right? Oh no, have we raised the prices too much? What's going on here? Well, as I mentioned, in this particular case, we were left with that question. Was it that we've reached some kind of break point in the pricing structure of your artwork, where now that we've gone over that amount, sales are going to decline? Which, to a certain extent, we wanted to see the total volume of sales maybe slow down a little bit. Classic economic theory is that when you start running up against the limits of your supply and your demand is very strong, you raise the prices so that your supply can increase, and hopefully your total profits will increase. But now you have to wonder, okay, have we made a mistake? And I will just mention that, as a gallery owner working with artists, having conversations about these kinds of issues and dealing with, let's just call it, some of the insecurities that can come, can be one of the more challenging aspects of the work that I do as a gallery owner. And I was fairly confident that, the increase in the value of work was about a 15 to 20% increase. It did not make sense to me that increase would have, had such a significant impact in sales, almost a 30% decline in sales. It just did not compute. What the other factor that was at play, we believed, was that the artist had shifted gears a little bit, from a creative standpoint. We've talked about this before, that obviously you want to take a balance of keeping things fresh and interesting, against the desire to keep some consistency. And it seemed to us that during the 22 and 23 season, the work that was produced, there was enough of a kind of a divergence from the core work that had successfully sold in previous seasons that we believe that might have had an impact. And so at the end of last season, at the end of the 22 through 23 season, we sat down with this artist and said, let's go back through and look over sales over the last several years, and let's look at some pieces as examples of work that just seemed to really hit the mark. that were home runs. And let's see if we can't see what it was about that work that was so interesting and exciting to our collectors. And it's not that we were telling the artist, please recreate these pieces for us. It was that we were just wanted to look at the work and say, okay, what was really working well? And it was an interesting conversation with the artist and actually the artist's spouse, in that at the end of the conversation, we were all saying, look, oh, I hadn't really realized that this particular subject matter was doing very well. Or that this particular style that I was doing and sizes were doing very well. And so we came out of that just with hopefully a little bit clearer picture of what it was that we could maybe focus on to increase sales. And the artist was excited, we were excited. And as we came into this season with a brand new body of work, you can see from this chart what that result was. A significant climb. I mean, even over the great season that we had for this artist in 21 through 22, not quite doubling, but getting pretty close to that. And so, in other words, what you create can make a difference, and having a conversation, being open to input from your gallery owners and kind of taking some of that feedback can have a pretty significant impact. And obviously, this had a significant impact for this artist, but also had a fairly significant impact on our total success during this season. So just one more thing to think about. Okay, here's another one. This one was suggested from one of you. What days of the week represent your best days for sales? And this one for me, it took a little bit of work to put this one together. But it was very interesting for me. I had the impression over the last several months that Mondays were going to be fairly important, because we have had several significant sales that have happened on Mondays that I've been a witness to or involved in. And so in my mind, I was saying it's going to have to be Mondays. Mondays are just seem to be amazing days for some reason. Well, when I ran the numbers, what it turned out was that actually Saturdays are the day. 30%, almost 30% of our sales are occurring on Saturdays, with Monday coming in number 2 at 15.8%, then Tuesdays. You kind of go on and see the other days here. We're closed on Sunday, so that's why Sunday is such a smaller day, but we still get online sales that occur on Sundays. But just kind of interesting to see, Thursday is the day on which we have our weekly art walk. So you might have suspected that Thursday could be a little bit stronger, but what we've seen is that it's often the case. We'll have some small sales at the art walk on Thursdays. But Thursdays actually tend to be during the day. We have a little bit less traffic because people are waiting to come to the art walk. And at the art walk itself, you don't have the tendency, first of all, you're not able to spend as much time with your customers. But there's just also, it's not quite the right energy for the big purchases. Now, it is the case, and of course, what this is showing is the day of the week on which the sale was finalized, upon which we took payment. And it is often the case that someone will come back on a Friday or a Saturday or a Monday and say, I was here at Art Walk and I saw this piece and I wanted to come back and look at it again. And now we can follow up with them and make the sale happen. But boy, it sure makes you think, I better make sure that our game is on Saturdays, right? That I have, that the gallery is well staffed. And that we're ready to work with our customers on those Saturdays. Monday's kind of interesting, even though it didn't end up being the top day as I suspected it would. It is interesting from the perspective that many galleries are closed on Mondays. Boy, I would sure hate to be closed on Monday and be missing out on almost 16% of our total sales that could be occurring. And often what's happening on a Monday is that people who have been in town visiting for a week or even over a weekend Monday is their day where they have to say, hey, we're flying out this afternoon. We better get our purchases made. And we saw a number of those kinds of transactions where it was, this is our last opportunity before we go home, and saw those sales occur. Okay, so here is our total volume of sales. And so on the left, we're seeing total sales, which would include both in-gallery sales and online sales. That's the blue column there. And then the red column is our online sales. And this is where we're going to see a little bit of that trade-off that I talked about, in that from last season to this season, we see a little bit of, not a huge, but a little bit of a decline in online and social media sales, right? Where that number goes down a little bit. Our total sales are up fairly significantly, but our online sales are down a little bit. And again, ideally, you wouldn't want to see that happen. You'd want to have this baseline where you're saying, I'm creating online sales. We're figuring out a system to do social media marketing. And those sales are staying strong. And on top of that, we're increasing our in-gallery sales. Ideally, you'd like to see both of those things happening. But the reality is, being human beings and having limited amounts of time available, but also limited amounts of energy, and kind of attention and those kinds of resources, I was not able to put as much time, and my team were not able to put as much time into social media marketing this season as we were last season, because we were busier working with our customers in the gallery. And so it's almost inevitable that you might see a little bit of a decline just because of that. Another factor, and we're overdue for another social marketing insider session. I'll be sure and let you know when the next one is coming up, but we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. And that is that we are seeing overall with social media marketing, that there is this tendency when you start marketing something new through social media, you get a kind of boost in sales during the first 3 or 4 months of selling that product on social media that then declines a bit over time. There are some ongoing benefits and sales that occur just by virtue of having a good volume of people continually seeing the artwork. But what we saw was that there is going to tend to be some low-hanging fruit in the marketplace, where it's easier for the social algorithms to generate the sales initially, and you kind of then burn through that part of the market, and you then start to see sales stabilize over time. So what we saw was that from October through December of 2022, so not this last season, but the previous season, we had very strong social media sales. And we're selling and advertising several different products, several different artists and artworks that we're selling very well. And though we've continued to market those works and the sales continue, they are not as strong as they were during that initial period. And so that is also reflected in this chart. So again, we will be talking a little bit more about this. Here is the conversion rate. So for our website, these numbers declined, and I'm still wrapping my head around what's happening here. Again, I think this is related somewhat to that experience of having done, and in fact, you can see it in the chart where you look at October through January. The dotted line is our 2022 through 23 season, and we were seeing a much higher conversion rate during that period. And right after that period, it started to decline. So I think that is a reflection of that kind of initial boost you get. We might call it beginner's luck, but really it's related to having a more interested market at the very beginning that then stabilizes and settles in. And so then the conversion rate as it goes down from there, has some ups and downs, but is somewhat steady. So that's definitely going to require some further analysis, and we're going to be looking for opportunities to improve that conversion rate. What I would also just point to, I always like to remind us of, is that we want to also be thinking just about the numbers, the reality of the numbers that have to come into play to generate the sale of a piece of artwork. And so you can see here that down at the bottom, it took 72,476 visits to our website to have 932 of those visitors add something to their cart. 657 of them reached the checkout, and only 337 of those went on to make a purchase. And so if you're and I hear this quite frequently as I'm talking to artists, and they say, well, yeah, I have my website and I get visitors, but I'm not generating sales. And my question is always going to be, okay, how many visitors are you getting? And if you're telling me, oh, I got 300 visitors last month. Well, if we look at these numbers, we realize, boy, that's just, we got to work to get a much higher volume of visitorship to our website as we start thinking about, that funnel that I've talked about before, where it's just going to take a good number to get down to those those kind of sales numbers. And I think this is another important one. My total ad spend for social media, and we're going to have to play this in, but I spent 60% less this season to generate the sales that we did. So even though our conversions were lower, and part of this lower ad spend was the fact that we were seeing a lower conversion rate, but the return on the investment was higher for that ad spend. And again, I'm going to dive into some of these numbers a bit more in a Social Marketing Insider session. But that is significant that we're able to not quite maintain the same level of sales, but to maintain a good level of social media sales with a significantly lower spend. We're going to talk about some techniques that we've been using that have helped us lower our cost there. Here's another one, just a quick one on social media. Not any surprise here, but a good percentage of the visitors to our website are coming from mobile as opposed to desktop. Okay, there we go. I've been talking nonstop for 51 minutes. Let me go ahead now and open it up. What questions do you have about our sales, about overall trends? What more would you want to know? What didn't we get to? Go ahead and click on the hand icon or throw your hand up. Comments that you have about what you've seen over this winter. Anyone want to hop in with any questions or comments about the season? Mason, let me go to you. Nope, you're still muted, Mason. Let's see if you can unmute there. There we go.
I can. How much increased business do you attribute to just like more knowing what you're doing with every passing year? Like when you first started out the business, you obviously didn't know as much as you know now.
Yes, no, that definitely is a significant impact, right? And there are several things that would come into play there. We know better how to interact with our customers, right? My staff is better trained. Although interestingly, one of my staff members this season is brand new. She's 23, 24 years old, and this is her first time working in an art gallery. And we were a little nervous. She was replacing, as I mentioned, one of our team members who moved out of state, and we were a little bit nervous about how she would do. She's done great. Her sales have been awesome. But part of that is that we also know better how to train, right? How to train someone to talk to customers and follow up. But she also has some natural talent there. But we're better at marketing. We're better at following up. We're better at promotion through newsletters and our other outreach to our customers. We're showing artwork. Year after year, you're trying to find artwork that's going to, have a better appeal to your customers. And so all of that certainly has a cumulative effect. And it's not surprising that a gallery that has been in business for 20 years would have better sales and better success than a gallery that's maybe been in business for 1 or 2 or 5 years. There certainly is some effect there. And again, that's why you're going to hopefully see over the long term a kind of steady increase upward and to the right in your sales figures, even though year over year, there can be some significant volatility. over time, you'd want to see just the baseline continue to increase as you gain more experience. Good question. Okay, Michelle, let me go to you, and then I'll go to Laura.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to echo that I've heard the same here. Our biggest gallery here, I heard her on a podcast. She did a long podcast, and she said 21, 22 best years ever. And a lot of that was flipping COVID money.
Right.
I have friends who are art collectors, and they said, yeah, we used our COVID money to buy art. And she said last year, worst year ever,
Yeah.
And this year she's made significant changes to her business. It appears, I haven't talked to her, but it appears like things have turned around in a big way. So you're not alone. I think that this is being echoed across, and you talk about inflation being high. Yeah, that was a shocker last year for everybody, but the economy is actually doing well. And the people that have money have more money because interest rates are high and the stock market is good. So people that are used to buying big art, they're still buying.
Yes. Yeah. And I think for a business and especially a gallery to make it in the long run, ultimately, none of us like going through the down years. They're not fun. They're not enjoyable in any way. And you always want to feel like you're winning and that things are going well. But it is those down years that force you, it almost, forces you to become more creative, to get your head back in the game. We all have this tendency that when things are going well, we tend to start to cruise a little bit. And it's not that I would ever say, oh, I'm so glad that every once in a while we have a terrible year. Boy, and it's been a while since we had one. I sure hope we have a terrible year next year. No, I'm not going to say that. But, ultimately, to make it in the long term, you've got to be in a position where you're able to learn and keep pushing and turn those bad years back into good years. But at the same time, Michelle, I do appreciate, and certainly you can't help but keep your ear to the ground and say, I hope it's not just us. I hope that it's not just that we're losers and failing and doing everything wrong. I hope that that the experience that we're having is reflective of that broader market.
Yep.
Laura, let me go to you, and then I'll go to Carol.
Yes, I would be interested to know whether you track your email subscriptions and watch fluctuation in that as well, and if there's any correlation between your number of email subscribers and your sales.
Yes, so we do, and that is a good question. And a little bit hard to track with 100% accuracy, because what happens is that, we're sending out our weekly newsletter, and we can see sometimes, and actually with some frequency, that people will click on a link, they'll go to our website, they'll add it to their cart, they'll make a purchase. And so we can directly correlate that newsletter activity and that particular subscriber to a sale. However, often what happens is someone will receive the newsletter and they will call us and say, hey, I'm really liking that piece, and tell me a little bit more, and what else do you have available? And then things maybe shift over to email, or maybe a purchase is made over the phone. We did see a fairly significant increase this year in the total number of what are called in Shopify draft orders. That's where we received a phone call, someone wants to purchase something, so we put an order into Shopify and email it to them rather than them adding it to their cart, and they just pay from that email. And so we saw a fairly significant increase there. I've not done the work to correlate, total number of subscribers to the total number of sales. What happens when we see a number of our email list users unsubscribing? What impact does that have? So I can't draw scientifically those correlations, but I can tell you, we saw that 30% of our sales are happening to existing customers. And a lot of that sales activity is either a direct result of newsletter communication, or at least it's an impact on the sale in that they're remembering us, and when they're in Scottsdale, they're sure to come and visit us because we just didn't slip into the recesses of their memory. We're there right at the front. And so, and I think about the assets that our business has. Certainly our email list and the work that we're doing to keep our clients informed is very important. Let me go to Carol.
Hey, Jason, thanks so very much for this. Very interesting stuff. I have a couple of part question or observation. One was that the sales by artists, when you're talking about your top 10, that was for a 6-month period, correct?
It's a little longer than that, right? Well, is it 6 November, December, January, February? Yeah, you're right. 6 months. Perfect.
6 months. So, if you were in that top 10, if that was a full year's worth, that would be, you could double that. That's not too shabby. So the next question is thinking on that. Well, if that's 6 months, how do you change your strategy when the Xanadu site is closed for the season? And, although I imagine all the artwork is still there, if someone purchases online, someone has to go over there and pull it out and ship it. And marketing wise, do you invest more in social marketing during the off season to keep the sales up there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed part of that question. So we just have the Scottsdale location, and it's open year round.
Oh, it is.
But just slows down during the season, or excuse me, during the summer.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we still, even though I'm in Pine Top right now, Kristen and Christina are in Scottsdale. They're working today. They made sales last night. And at the end of the year, we'll see that those sales dip fairly significantly during June, July, August, and September. They're not zero. We still kind of have a baseline of sales. We do shift more of our effort towards social media marketing and online sales. We'll still have some people visiting the gallery. There are some crazy souls who are still in Arizona during the summer months, and they will make a point to come and visit us. So, as we think about the off season, it is also really an opportunity for us to prepare for the coming season, right? Where a lot of the time that's where a shift in maybe saying goodbye to some artists is occurring and bringing some new artists on. Talking to artists about inventory for the upcoming season. And so we try, even though the total volume of sales and the activity with clients decreases, we're still keeping very busy as we work on preparing for the upcoming season. And a lot of our success that's occurring during our high season can be credited to efforts that were made to prepare during the low season. Jane, I'm going to pull you in, and you're going to get the last comment and question today as we run out of time.
All right, lovely. Thank you. I was just thinking about your online sales figures and the conversion rate, and you had 72,000 visits to your site for 300 sales. And obviously my immediate reaction to that was, is it, as a sort of individual artist, do you think that we should be really putting much effort into trying to generate online sales, given that we're unlikely to get 72,000 visitors to our site?
It's a great question and a great point. Although I might say, that was to generate 300 sales. Well, how much happier would you be in a year if you were even to generate 12 more sales through your website or 20 more sales through your website? So, it's not that you have to get quite to those same kind of levels, but still, you do certainly need to be generating a lot of traffic to get to some online sales. And I guess what I would say is, we want to be thinking about what you can be doing with the resources that you have available to you that will be most likely to generate results. What can you do that offers you the most leverage? What efforts can you be taking that will put your artwork in front of the people who are most likely to buy it and in front of a good number of those people? And my suggestion is, and part of the reason we're here talking the way we do each week, is that my suggestion is that from my experience, it makes the most sense for an artist to first focus on getting their work into galleries and other venues where that work can be seen by interested parties, by people who are self-selecting as being interested in purchasing art. And so your efforts to get your work into galleries has a multiplicative effect in that with, even though we got to reach out to a good number of galleries to get representation, once we do get representation in that gallery, you're getting access to all of their marketing efforts and all of the traffic that is visiting that gallery. And so even though it is a good amount of work, it does have a leveraging effect where you get to have a fairly significant impact on the total number of people who are seeing the artwork and likely to buy it. And only then, once I start getting into galleries and I start sustaining relationships with those galleries, then I start thinking about other efforts I can be making to increase my visibility and exposure and sales. And so that would include social media marketing and other online marketing efforts. And those projects I'm going to be thinking about more on a long-term basis, where I want to be thinking about repetitive activities that I'm doing and plans that I'm implementing that can start to boost the total volume of traffic that I'm getting to my website to start to get some of those sales. It is a bigger mountain to climb to get enough volume to your website to start generating regular sales than it is to get representation in galleries. So my suggestion is to start there. But great question. And again, we'll be talking more about that in some of our upcoming social media sessions. I want to thank you all for joining me today to talk about the season and sales. There were a couple of questions that were submitted as kind of more open Q&A that I did not get to today. I will try and get to those in next week's session. We will be back here next week to revisit some of these issues and to continue talking about your particular issues. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll look forward to seeing